Just another weekend road trip, nothing out of the ordinary. I was with 3 friends driving from our small UC campus up to Big Sur for a break from the stress of senior year. The car was packed with snacks, tents, and camping gear, and the sun was setting behind us as we hit the winding coastal highways. The first couple of hours were full of laughter, music blasting, and jokes about who had the worst taste in songs. But somewhere around halfway, when the fog started rolling in thicker than the map had indicated, the atmosphere changed. Damon, who was driving, squinted through the windshield and muttered that the GPS was acting weird. I remember laughing it off, saying it was just signal interference from the cliffs. But deep down, something in the back of my mind was uneasy.
The fog grew heavier and visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet ahead. Then we saw headlights. At first, we assumed it was another traveler, but as it drew closer, the car slowed and fell in line behind us. At first, it seemed normal, just a stranger following the same route, but when we took an exit and the car mirrored us exactly, I felt a chill run down my spine. I asked Damon if he saw it, and his hands gripped the wheel tighter. "It's just someone lost," he said, but none of us believed him. Every turn we took, every stop we made, the black SUV behind us followed, never signaling, never slowing. I started recording it on my phone, thinking that if something went wrong, at least there'd be evidence. The minutes stretched into hours, and the SUV never let up. Finally, I suggested we take a side road that led to a small rest stop. Damon was hesitant, but the others backed me up. We pulled into the empty parking lot, the fog swallowing the edges of the lot, and waited. Minutes later, the SUV drove past without stopping. Relief washed over us, but it was fleeting. When we finally made it to our campsite, we noticed fresh tire tracks leading right up to where we had parked. No one else had been there, but the marks were clear.
The second story involved a man named Paul who had been driving from Phoenix to Albuquerque on a solo trip. Paul loved solitude, long stretches of open road where he could think and not be disturbed. One night, on a nearly deserted highway, his car broke down. He pulled over under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, popped the hood, and tried to assess the problem. That's when he noticed another car approaching. A rusty old pickup truck, with headlights dimmed as if to avoid detection, stopped behind him. A man got out, middle-aged, weathered, with long greasy hair and a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. Without asking, the man leaned over Paul's car and began fiddling with the engine, muttering about needing a special tool. Paul, though cautious, felt relieved at first, until the man suddenly asked for his phone. Paul hesitated but handed it over. The man took it, pulled out a gun with the other hand, and calmly demanded Paul's wallet and keys. "Sit down," he said, voice flat, practiced. Paul did, heart hammering. He watched helplessly as the man rifled through everything, then got back in his truck and drove away. It was only later, after reporting the incident and following up with the police, that Paul learned the truck had been stolen months earlier and that the same man had been linked to a string of robberies targeting solo travelers along that stretch of highway. What had made it terrifying wasn't just the robbery, it was knowing how easily he could have been killed and how precise the man had been in choosing his victim. Back to my own story. The third nightmare occurred on a drive from Los Angeles to Yosemite. My friends and I, Hunter, Benjamin, Armin, and I, were returning from a weekend camping trip. We were tired, driving through a sparsely populated stretch of highway, when Benjamin noticed a figure on the side of the road, waving frantically. Hunter slowed to a stop, and the figure, a young woman, drenched, pale, and shaking, asked for a ride. Against my better judgment, we let her in. She didn't speak much at first, just stared out the window, and when she finally did, it was in a whispery voice that made my skin crawl. She said, "They're watching. You shouldn't be here." We laughed it off, assuming she was exhausted or hallucinating from walking in the cold. But as we drove, I noticed headlights in the rearview mirror following us. Not just one vehicle, two. And they stayed there no matter how many lanes we changed or turns we took. Benjamin suggested pulling over and letting her out, but she begged us to keep going. Please, don't stop. They'll know. By the time we reached a gas station in the next town, the woman insisted we let her out quietly. We did, and she disappeared into the night before we could even ask her name. Hunter, who was always the cautious one, said we should call the police, but there was nothing to report. No plates, no description, just a young woman running into the dark. We continued driving, but a strange unease hung over us. When we stopped for the night at a motel near the park entrance, we saw a car parked outside our room. No driver in sight. When we went to the bathroom, it was gone. The next morning, the woman's words echoed in my mind. They're watching. I didn't sleep well the entire night. Even now, I can't explain the coincidence of the two vehicles shadowing us, the woman's terrified insistence, and the strange, fleeting appearances of a car outside our... The first road trip story still haunts me most because of how easily things could have gone wrong. We were traveling to Big Sur when our car broke down on a lonely cliffside road. The fog was thick, the ocean crashing far below us, and my phone had no signal. That's when a man appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, offering help. He was polite, well-dressed, and professional. I was naive enough to let him pop the hood and diagnose the issue. Minutes later, he asked me for my wallet, my phone, and my car keys. His tone was calm, almost friendly, but there was a lethal edge in his eyes. My friends froze in fear, and in that moment I realized how unprepared we were. Somehow, though, luck intervened. The man left after rifling through our possessions, and we survived. But later, when I learned he had been tied to multiple assaults along the coastal highway, the memory of those seconds of terror became vivid nightmares. The second story was purely a matter of paranoia and observation. I remember it clearly. A friend, Sebas, and I had just finished basic training, and Kay, our mutual friend, suggested a drive down the highway to clear our heads. About an hour in, Sebas noticed a car that seemed to follow our every move. At first, it was funny, a prank maybe, but then we realized the driver mirrored every lane change, every acceleration, every stop we made. It was an unmarked SUV, black with heavily tinted windows. When it finally pulled over behind us and three men emerged, I could feel the fear radiating from Sebas and Kay. They looked like cops, but something was off. Their demeanor, the patches on their jackets, the casual way they scanned our vehicle. After questioning us briefly about military service, they let us go. Hours later, news reports showed bodies discovered along that stretch of highway, and the SUV had been identified as stolen. Knowing we had passed unseen danger by inches made the drive one of the most unsettling experiences of our lives. The third story blends fear, suspense, and the unexplained. It happened when Armand, Benjamin, Hunter, and I were driving back from a weekend trip. We were on a 2-lane highway in the middle of the night when we passed a man walking along the shoulder. He seemed normal at first, carrying a duffel bag, but when we stopped for a rest break a few miles later, he was standing next to our car, as if he had teleported there. Hunter, always cautious, asked if we knew him. None of us did. The man smiled, unnervingly wide, and said, "I've been following you. Don't worry, I mean no harm." We laughed nervously, but there was something in his eyes that felt predatory. We drove away, but I caught glimpses of the headlights trailing us in the rearview mirror for the next hour. By the time we reached a small motel, the man had vanished. There were no signs, no tracks, nothing to indicate he had ever been there, but the sense of being stalked lingered for weeks afterward. Each of these experiences left its mark. The first taught me the danger of trusting strangers on isolated roads. The second instilled a lasting sense of vigilance during long drives. And the third reminded me that sometimes the most terrifying threats aren't violent.
They're unseen, inexplicable, and impossible to escape. Road trips for me are no longer just adventures. They're calculated risks. Every mile, every turn, every shadow on the shoulder makes me double-check that I'm alert, aware, and ready. Even now, when I drive alone on empty highways, I think about those nights, those strangers, and the black SUVs that mirrored every move. I remember the woman whispering in terror, the man rifling through Paul's car with a gun in hand, and the figure that appeared as if from nowhere to follow us. The road can be as beautiful as it is deadly, and I've learned that sometimes danger is silent, patient, and terrifyingly human, or not human at all. It's these memories, these 3 true road trip horrors, that keep me awake at night, that make me hesitate before picking up friends for another trip, and that make me grip the steering wheel a little tighter when fog rolls in and headlights appear behind me. Because no matter how well you plan, no matter how cautious you are, the road always has a way of reminding you that sometimes you are not alone, and the people who follow you may not have any intention of letting you go.